what we have for today is yet another chunk of free loot, so to speak, coming to you in patch 10.1.5. We have talked about the not so free loot coming in 10.1.5 from the Mega Dungeon, the Dawn of the Infinite dungeon coming in 10.1.5. Now we have another in-game activity coming called the Time Rifts. So these Time Rifts, without spoiling too much, are going to be a very simple, hey, the timelines are all fucked up, there are these mobs from different timelines popping out of this portal in Tadrassus, and you have to complete some steps of objectives similar to invasions, similar to the storm events, right? Kill this, kill that, collect these things, pick up these things, etc., until eventually you reach the boss. Doing all of this gives you a bunch of fragments, and completing the actual event gives you a token. You can then trade in the fragments plus tokens for the more rare rewards for cool stuff. You have toys, you have pets, you have tabards, and then you have transmog items, and as far as gear is concerned, you have trinkets. You have trinkets with some old school expansion, old school bosses flavors. For example, the first in line we have that you can get from these Time Rifts is the Paracausal Fragment of Frostmourne. Now, what is important to point out is that unlike the Mega Dungeon trinkets and all of the Mega Dungeon loot, which can go all the way up, at the very least, supposedly, to 437, because it's on the Champion upgrade track, these trinkets from the Time Rifts at the moment cap out at 424. They are on the Veteran Champion upgrade track. So, yes, 424 is not a very high item level. However, if there is one item slot in your gear where we have seen players multiple times keep items, keep gear at a lower item level, is the trinkets, because of some very powerful effects which might still make you want to use these trinkets even if their item level is quite low. And even then, they are still good. They're still good picks, good pickups for the more casual player base to get some decent trinkets. So the first in line is the Paracausal Fragment of Frostmourne. Very simple. Getting close, being close to a dying enemy or a dying player gives you a lost soul stack, and then you can activate the trinket every 2.5 minutes to consume the souls and gain a buff based on the souls consumed. Every soul you have obtained gives you a smaller buff over time, like for example, it can give you mana regen over time per soul you have, and then when you activate the actual trinket, you get a big amount, the big amount of the same buff you were having over time based on the amount of souls you have. Right now, you have things like mana regen, likely for healers, you have tanks getting health regen, and then you have certain DPS specs at the moment having mastery, gaining stacking mastery per stack of lost soul, and then you can activate the trinket to get a bigger amount of mastery over 20 seconds. So this is the first trinket we have. It's for all specs, all classes, agility, strength, and intellect, likely still going to be more useful for DPS players, and also goes without saying, this is basically a mythic class only trinket because the lost soul stacks go up based on the enemies that die. So, mythic class has plenty of enemies dying over and over, which makes it a much better mythic class compared to a raid. Then we have another reference, Paracausal Fragment of Sulfuras. This is a triple proc trinket. You can proc extra fire damage with your auto attacks, you can proc extra fire damage with your abilities, and you can proc extra fire damage as a counter attack when you are taking damage, when you are being attacked. So technically this seems to be better for a tank, for continued passive damage on a tank, because the tank can make use of all these three procs, and then you have the melee DPS and hunters that can make use of two of these procs because they are auto-attacking, and then you have the range DPS, which can only take use of the chance to proc the fragment effect while using abilities. Since they don't auto-attack, and very likely they won't be taking direct damage, they don't have nearly as many ways to proc this trinket. So, considering the effect is not super shiny, super flashy, unless the base damage is tuned very highly, this will likely be one of the weaker of the trinkets, unless perhaps for tanks, if the proc per minute over here works for all three types of effects, 2 procs per minute for each and every one of the applications, but that seems unlikely at the moment. Then you have the dual faction trinket. You have the paracausal fragment of Doomhammer, which is also the same as the paracausal fragment of Charlemagne. So Thrall's weapon and Varian's weapon. You have once again another, proc chance to do extra damage with your attacks, melee attacks and abilities. So once more, melee, DPS and hunter only trinket. And then every 90 seconds, every minute and a half, you can activate the trinket to let loose a 5-hit combo upon your target, doing a whole bunch of damage. Now, this one will also be likely quite bad as far as Mythic Plus is concerned, because it is only for single target. And as we know, if we go and look even at trinkets being used in Mythic Plus, for example, many times the trinkets picked up are going to be trinkets that do a ton of AoE damage. If you look at the rankings with logs only, so that we can see the trinkets, many of which will be using certain things like, just to name one, the more powerful one, the Beacon of the Beyond, to do splash AoE damage, even better if it's split evenly. So you can use it as a single target trinket, but then you can also use it as an AoE trinket. This is the Heart of Thunder AoE trinket. Then you have the Erupting Spear Fragment, which also does damage split amongst all enemies. So plenty of ways to do AoE damage with trinkets. These two only doing single target are unlikely to be as good. Then we have, back to something for healers, we have the Paracausal Fragment of Seschenal. Now, if you are confused, because this is a pretty easy reference to Frostmourne, this one to Sulfuras, this one to Doomhammer, what's this? This is the Staff of Eonar, one of the Pantheon's titans. Now, as far as healing goes, manifest a sapling of life at the target location that periodically restores health to nearby allies. As the sapling gives, its life slowly fades, but healing the sapling of life extends its duration. So this is likely already a little bit annoying for a healer, having to keep track of basically an extra bar, an extra frame, just to make sure you can keep healing this sapling to keep healing players around. And then of course it's on the ground. So once you put it down on the ground, it's only useful in a 25-yard radius in there. If you move away, that's gone. Again, maybe the tuning is very high, maybe the tuning is high enough that this makes healer want this trinket. It's unlikely. I don't think this effect is going to be very powerful for healers. What might be more powerful though is the Paracausal Fragment of Val'Anyr, the old legendary from Ulduar for healers. Your healing spells have a chance to grant you Blessing of Eternal Kings for 15 seconds, allowing your heals to shield the target for up to 60k damage for 8 seconds. So this one is quite strong. Obviously it has a 1 proc per minute, so every minute you have 8 seconds where you can splash extra shields. Now of course it depends on how is this going to affect healing spells. Am I just going to be able to land massive AoE heals that proc this trinket at the same time? Like for example, if I use Wild Growth on a druid, if I use Circle of Healing on a priest, if I spread my echo to 15 targets and then I use Dream Breath, am I going to spread this trinket to 15 targets? So it depends how nicely and how well it can spread this effect, but the effect is of course very powerful. Absorb shields are one of the strongest, and when it goes wrong, the most overpowered way to heal. So it might be actually a reasonably strong trinket for the raid. For Mythic Plus, this is whatever, not very good. Then we have another reference, this time for TBC. This is a reference to the old daggers from Illidan, dropping from Illidan, because your spells and abilities have a chance to proc and summon a Fel Elemental by your side to damage your target for 20 seconds. On top of that, when the elemental spawns, you gain a whole bunch of haste for 12 seconds as well. So this one seems to have a proc per minute of 1. Again, so every minute you get 12 seconds of haste and 12 seconds of this elemental doing damage to your target. Depending on the tuning, depending on the damage of the elemental, this might be okay. You also have the haste proc, so specs synergizing with haste, maybe they will go for this type of trinket perhaps. The last in line of the trinkets is the coolest one, and it's also perhaps in line for the record of longest name as well as longest description, because this is the Paracausal Fragment of Thunderfin, the Humid Blade of the Tide Seeker. Yes, I know. I know we are going to get some new flavor of chat spam with this item. Either way, your spells and ranged abilities, so this is a ranged item, have a chance to spawn a cyclone at your target's location. The cyclone is going to follow the target and also do a bunch of damage split evenly amongst enemies. On top of that, while that cyclone is on top of the enemy and you're damaging the enemy debuffed by this cyclone, your attacks have a high chance to unleash a bolt of forked lightning, dealing more split AoE damage amongst all of the enemies around your target. So finally, we have an AoE trinket, first of all, and then we have an AoE trinket that does split damage, which means it can still do good damage if it only hits a single target. So this can be quite good, depending on the tuning, depending on the proc rate. This one says at the moment, again, 1 proc per minute, which, you know, in Mythic Plus, it can still mean it's always going to proc every pack. You know, every minute, every pack you go for, you're going to proc this trinket. So if the tuning is good enough, perhaps if you are a fast casting spec or a fast attacking spec like a hunter, maybe, that you can proc this extra effect, the forked lightning effect on this trinket often enough, it might even be good. It might even be decent. Obviously, the main drawback is the fact that at the moment the trinkets from these events, these Time Rift events, stop at 424 item level. So they might be just good enough. If all of your gear was at 424, this might have been a best in slot, but maybe because now you can get, you know, to 442, 443 and higher, this might not be able to keep up. But, you know, the effect might be powerful enough that some specs might actually end up doing quite well with this trinket. So these are all of the available trinkets at the moment in patch 10.1.5 when it comes to the Time Rifts. Now, worth pointing out for context is that these don't actually drop from bosses, so you don't have to wait for the right Time Rift from the right expansion. You know, the Time Rift from Wrath to loot the fragment of Frostmourne, and then back to the Time Rift of Vanilla to loot Sulfuras. These are all coming from a vendor, so all you have to do is get the actual currency before you can just go to the vendor and buy these trinkets. That is what's available as well in 10.1.5 as far as loot. As I said, it might be likely, purely because they will be scaling at a higher item level, that the trinkets from the Mega Dungeon will actually have a chance to be best in slot for quite a few specs if their effects are strong enough compared to these ones, which seem to be more of a, you know, funny, entertaining, catch-up event type of situation rather than offering you actual powerful items. But who knows? Maybe with the tuning, if it's gonna be powerful enough, some of these trinkets, even at lower item level, might end up being quite powerful for certain specs. We will see. In a few weeks, once these things go live, we will see just how powerful they will be for several of the specs. But for now, this is all we have for today as well when it comes to the loot coming in 10.1.5. We are going for our goodbyes once more by thanking all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution, but don't forget that you can still support just fine for free. You can like and comment down below on this video, quite important, together with subscribing to the channel as well, of course. And with these things out of the way, it's time to leave each other once more. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I don't think these trinkets will be too powerful. I think Blizzard came up with these trinkets just so they could come out with the Thunder Fury meme trinket, honestly.